4 years of the historic protest and SARS. What started out as a protest against police brutality, but quickly grew into a protest for ending bad governance, demanding accountability. And over the past 4 years, we've seen more protests come out on the back of the NSAS protest. Joining us to discuss the impact it had 4 years on is a nation builder, Daniel Otabo. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you so much.
We're also joined by a social entrepreneur and an NSAS activist, Eroms Adene. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I will move straight to you, Daniel, and let's just look at the overview in 4 years as a nation builder. What role did you see NSAS contributing in nation building?
I think the NSAS was an awakening for Nigerian youth. We realized that we had the power to change the system, right? For the first time for most young people, we came together in unison, right? We had a common cause and we're chasing the same thing, right? We wanted good governance. So I think it actually awakened the political awareness in most young people. So it was a good one for us.
So that awakening and the youth coming together. I'll move to you, Eroms. As an NSAS activist, that means you're part and parcel of it. Can you just share your experience briefly for those who are not aware, to hear directly what you went through during those protests?
Okay, so the protest was, first and foremost, it was amazing, right? Seeing young people come together, there was no tribalism, there was no you're of this religion, you're of that religion. It was amazing. And for someone like myself and a couple of hundreds of other people who slept at the protest ground, right? We slept there for days. We're literally holding the fort, right? So when people come in the morning, we just continue from where we stopped. Then just freshen up in the morning or afternoon when people have come, but we're sleeping over and doing this, back to back. So I had the opportunity to watch the protest grow from Alausa, right, till it went across the whole country. And it was really encouraging, truthfully encouraging. Then the abduction happened, which a lot of people know about. I was abducted because I was heavily involved in the NSAS protest. And according to what they said, we were calling for NSAS Part 2, which in itself is literally our civil rights. But I was abducted because of that, picked up from my home, locked on the ground, taken to different places just because we spoke up. And I mean, we are here. We're
still speaking up. I'm going to move to our third guest who is joining us via Zoom, a barrister and the founder of Hope Beneath, I beg your pardon, Funke Adeoye of Global Rights. Funke, welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Very much for having me. It's Funke Adeoye of Hope Behind Bars Africa, not Global Rights.
Hope Behind Bars, I beg your pardon, Hope Behind Bars Africa. Thank you for joining us. So in your experience over the past 4 years, how important has this NSAS movement been in getting the youth together, in demanding for good governance?
I would say that NSAS went a very long way in awakening young people in Nigeria about the need to be part of the governance processes. We can look at everything that has happened post-NSAS. There are the issues around whether the reforms we were asking for as young people has been met. And there are issues around what has happened in terms of movement building, youth activism, and even political apathy. When you look at these three things I mentioned, you will find that we have less people who have apathy towards the political system because they know, for instance, that now elections matter and it's important for young people to have their voices heard during elections. I think a lot of things that happened during NSAS protests contributed to developing that political awareness among young people. We also see that the impact of NSAS was felt not just in Nigeria, but even across Africa. Take, for instance, the movement that arose in Kenya this year, where young people came out speaking against the tax reforms that had happened in Kenya. A lot of the movement building, a lot of the organization that happened in Kenya is as a result of the successes of the NSAS protest. So I would say
we're
that
seeing that influence on the continent, and it's not just in Nigeria, but we're getting youth across Africa to come together as Nigeria, as a case study, the NSAS, that you can use protest as a way to engage governance. I will move to you, Daniel, and I want us to look at the impact, because it's one thing for us to come together, but how many of the demands, because there were very specific demands, have been met, and how effective has this protest been in ensuring that we have even better representation, youth representation? For example, we have leaders that are accountable.
Well, I would say that most of the reforms are still in progress. I wouldn't actively say that they've done A, B, C, D, and it's all working for us right now. I would say that they're still in progress, right? As it concerns youth representation, that still is still in progress, okay? But I think what's important for me is the fact that, like she rightly said, most young people are not aware of their responsibility to build the nation, right? Most young people are now saying to themselves, we saw what happened 4 years ago. We saw the power of unity. We saw the power of one voice. We saw the power when young people say to themselves that they're fed up with bad governance, right? And if you look at it very well, we had one of the highest voters registration after the NSAS protests, right? Young people came out to say they wanted to cast their votes. They got their PVCs. They went out to vote. You know, the election is a different story entirely, but essentially young people came out to say they wanted to get their PVCs. And at the back of that, we saw a new candidate come, and then he had like young people backing him during the last election. So yes, it's awakened the minds of young people, and it has helped to just galvanize more people to say you have to be responsible for the outcome of the Nigerian system.
I'll move to you, Rams. When it comes to protesting, that's one form of demanding accountability. But beyond protesting, what else should the youth be doing to ensure that they get those answers, to ensure that the reforms happen, to ensure that leaders are held accountable?
Okay, yes, you're very correct. Protesting is one way, one effective way. Another effective way, for example, like here I just mentioned, is coming out to vote. You can't protest for 4 years, and then when it's time to vote in good leaders, you're nowhere to be found. So you have to come out to vote. However, within those 4 years, we have 4 years gap. What are we doing in between the 4 years? Some of the things we can do, which is currently what Abenol, my organization, is doing, we sensitize young people about the elections that will be held. For example, we have local government elections coming up in Lagos State next year, July. We have some states have already held local government elections. Some are about to hold local government elections. How important is the local government election, right? We young people have to go and learn, research. And if you do not have the time to research, we have materials online, that's Abenol NG. We have materials that we've been releasing about the LG's project. We just had an LG's conference where you were a guest, an amazing guest as well.
So there are ways that we can be involved at local level, at state level.
Yes.
It's not just enough to wait for the 4-year cycle for the national elections, when there are ways we can engage. I'm going to move to our guest on Zoom, and that's Funke. And I want to let you build on that point about ensuring that the youth come out because of the influence that NSAS has had. Now let's look at it locally. Yes, it has helped in steering movements on the continent, but locally, has it done enough to ensure that our leaders don't wait for the next protest before they begin to respond to those demands, before they become accountable?
That NSAS has its successes, and it has so many lessons to learn from. When you look at post-NSAS, a lot of movements have arisen. For instance, the End Bad Governance protest that happened a couple of weeks ago, and it really was the same thing, awakening of the citizens, not just young people now, but everybody understanding that elections have consequences, and this is where we are now. If we don't use our voices, we would not be heard. Sadly, what we have seen is the same line of action where the government tries to push back on the citizens. But as we're speaking right now, we have people who still showed up for the NSAS memorial at Lekki toll gate today, and a lot of them were arrested. Now, you would expect that in spite of the government pushback that keeps happening every time citizens come out to protest, people would stop coming out. But the truth is, we already understand that our voices are our power, and we would always continue to use our voices. So I would say that NSAS as a whole has done a whole lot in not just awakening citizens, but helping them to see that they cannot shut down your voices as long as you keep coming out. And also the other part of my response would be to say the government has a lot to do in returning the trust of the people back, because a lot of promises were made post NSAS, but the question is how many of them have been respected? This year, the ECOWAS court released a judgment with respect to NSAS, saying that indeed the Nigerian government violated the rights of citizens and they needed to go back to investigate the situation or what happened October 20th. But as of today, nothing has been done about it. So I think one of the most important things we have to do now post NSAS is looking at those promises that were made and asking ourselves, how far has the government gone in keeping to its promises? Yes, they disbanded SARS immediately, but in my space, I work with people who daily are being victims of police brutality. We get lawyers to release them from arbitrary detention and all of that. And I can tell you for free that even though SARS has been disbanded, we still have lots of issues around police brutality, extrajudicial killings still happening, bribery, extortion, even on the media. If you go to the media today, you would see lots of those things. So I think for us, it's important that we ask ourselves, how do we continue to hold the government accountable to those promises that were made 4 years ago? And what can we as citizens do other than using our voices, other than coming out for elections? Can we begin to engage international human rights systems, just like what has happened at the ECOWAS court, and issues around that?
Thank you for that. I'll move to you now, Daniel. And this is now looking at the judiciary, building on what she has said, because we still have cases, we still have instances of, for example, we have a journalist who was a victim of NSAS, and till now, 4 years later, the family is still asking for answers. And only just recently was there a case, and they've launched a full-scale investigation. How can we ensure that it doesn't even take this long, and when it does finally happen, that justice prevails?
So that's a very interesting question, because when you look at the judicial system in Nigeria, you almost do not have any hope or trust. You don't trust the system. It's quite unfortunate, because you would think that the judiciary is the last resort of the common man, but that's not the case, right? So we need to have a general overhaul of the judicial system. Even as it concerns after elections, before elections, there are people who lost their life during that protest, known fact, right, that have not gotten justice up to today. Their case have not been heard. Nothing has been done about it. It's just us going around and around the circles. So I would say that they need to be accountable. They need to understand their responsibility in holding the executive government accountable and the legislative government accountable. They have a role to play in ensuring that the citizens still trust the country. For crying out loud, there are people still in prison from that protest. People still in prison that their cases have not been heard, right? These things need to be solved. We can't keep on every 4 years we come, every year rather, in the next year we come with the same thing we're talking about. I think at a point, the people in government need to be ashamed of this situation and say we need to do something about it, as opposed to just allowing it fly in the air. People are making this thing look like it's people lost their lives.
And what's interesting is that 4 years on, we're still seeing arrests. I mean, buttressing what Funke said, which is arrests are happening. If you look on screen, you'll actually see these live video images from earlier today. We're actually seeing people being arrested, and they're not even protesting. They're just honoring the people who've lost their lives, the people who are still in prison, the Nigerians who believed that they can exercise their rights for demanding good governance, ending police brutality. What is that message to the government, Eroms? As somebody who has been in that shoes, and I'm sure you're looking at it and it's bringing back memories from 4 years when you were also arrested. Should the government still be doing this 4 years on?
At this point, I would just say if they had nothing to hide, they wouldn't be doing this 4 years on. That's just what I'm going to say. If there was nothing that happened at the toll gate like they claimed, on the 20th of October 2020, they wouldn't be doing this. Now, the second aspect, the demands of the NSAS protest, have you met it? People came out to ask very simple things. I'm going to say a very fun fact. Shortly after I was abducted, right, because there's a part where there are currently interviews that are online, so they took my phone away for like 6 months, and I was earning for my phone. So when I kept going back to the police to ask, okay, when am I going to get my phone back, right? When am I going to get my phone back? One of the times I went there, one of the policemen that came to pick me up from my house was telling me, please, they've not increased our salary. Help us talk to, because they believed I was now, I had access to the government and all of that. Please
That
talk
you
to
were
the
their
government.
voice. So they were now using you as their mouthpiece.
Do you understand? And I'm
to
like,
demand for the good governance that
funny enough,
Nigerians came
those
out for.
policemen that asked me to speak up for their salary, they are probably there arresting people today. They are probably there arresting people because they didn't give my phone for like 6-8 months.
Okay,
it's
going
interesting.
I'm going to move to Funke,
okay.
and the question now is the police reform that has been demanded. Where are we on that, and what can the judiciary do to ensure that people get justice and things like this don't happen? And if people are being arrested, then people need to face the full consequences of the law.
That we have a long way to go with respect to reforms. And it's not just the judiciary, it's the criminal justice system as a whole, from the courts from the police to the court to our correctional system. One of my favorite part of the 1999 Constitution is Section 14 Sub 2, which says the security and welfare of the people shall be the sole objective of the government. Is about the shortest phrase in the Constitution. The security and welfare of the people shall be the sole purpose of government. Now, a situation whereby an institution that is meant to ensure that people's life is secure is the one that is being used to perpetrate impunity, or is the one that is going against the rule of law, then we have a big problem on our hands. Now, when you look at some of the promises that were made by the government started the NSAS panel. To date, we don't really have anything that has any major thing that has come out of the NSAS panel. Even the NSAS panel in Lagos did say that certain violations happened, but to date, we don't have any officer that has been held accountable. Now, one of our greatest problems in the country is our lack of consequences. People don't see consequences for their actions. Now, a situation whereby policemen engage in police brutality and there is no consequence for their action, then it means we keep going round in circle. Now, back to what Aaron's mentioned about the welfare, that was one of the major asks of the NSAS protest, the welfare of the policemen. Now, these people, you give them guns, you let them go to the street, and then you expect them to feed off a very, very mere salary. It's really like an anomaly because we'll not get anything out of it. So I would say that it's important we have an overhaul of the Nigerian criminal justice system. And where to start from is to start from our history. When you look at the policing architecture in the country as it is right now, when you look at the history of the policing architecture, it is a child of colonial constructs. It was set up not to protect lives and property, not to secure the people. It was set up to protect the regime in the government at the time. This was in the 1990s, in the 1929 or thereabouts, after the Aba women riot. And that same policing architecture followed us to independence, followed us to the current administration where we have the federal government. And for some reason, the government prefers to keep it this way because it looks like the police is there to protect the regime at hand and not necessarily the people. So if we want to reform things, we have to go back to the beginning. Yes, they came up with a new Police Act of 2020. But when you look at the architecture as it is, things are not going to change. Why? Because the problem has started from the manner in which the police is set up. We don't have community policing, which is the police being closer to the people, but we have policing as an occupation. So I think it's important that we go back to the drawing board.
Going back to the drawing board and overhaul of the system. I'd like you to react, Daniel, because in one way, NSAS has brought the youths together. It's brought people out on the streets. But looking at those images of people being arrested, people's rights being trampled on, both popular, not regular people on the roads, is that encouraging for more young people to continue to go out on the streets, when there's that sense of this is not going to even do anything, I'm just probably going to get arrested and life will go on, because 4 years after, we're still making those demands?
Yeah, I mean, the truth be told, there's nothing encouraging about living in Nigeria, to be honest, right? It then means that if you're looking for something that will encourage you to fight for your right in Nigeria, you will never find it. It means that regardless of what these people are doing, we must always stand for what is right and demand for justice. They would always try their best to suppress us, right? Like I said, if you want something that will encourage you, you wouldn't come out to fight for your rights. So let's leave that aside and say, regardless of what these people are doing in government, we must always stand for what is right and demand for justice. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Daniel Otabo, a nation builder, for your contributions, and also social entrepreneur and NSAS activist, Erom Zadene, and Funke Adeoye, a lawyer and founder of Hope Behind Bars, for your contributions.